Hello, my friends. How are you today? Let's make sure we've got some lights on the subject here. I want you to be able to really see me because we're going to be cooking up some really interesting things for you today. Today, we're going to be testing out several different color catchers. These are called color and dye absorbers or color and dirt collectors. We've got color grabbers, and we have my old standard, the Shout color catcher. So I want to be able to compare all of these different products. We will go in on Amazon and look for these products and see how much they cost. And then we can compare what works better for the price. So how are we going to test this out? I've got an overhead camera here. I'm going to see if we can switch cameras so that, oh, I guess I don't have access to that feature on Zoom. Okay, so we're going to show you how I'm going to perform this experiment here today in my sewing room. So since I don't have my overhead camera, we're going to move this a little bit closer so you can see exactly what I'm doing with this pot of fun I have here in front of me. Get my chair out of the way and we're ready to go. Okay, so this morning, the last several days, I have been playing with the idea of these color catchers. And so I wanted to give you a good demonstration of how the color catchers work. So I took some of my red fabrics, orange fabrics, purple fabrics, and I put them in a pot here with some nice hot water to extract as much of the excess dye as possible. And I just set it on my stove on low for about half an hour, just to make sure that I could get out all or some of the excess dye from these fabrics. And this one in particular, I knew that this one was going to be a doozy. It's a hand-dyed fabric, deep, deep reds and burgundies, and even some black in there. And I knew that one was going to run like crazy. So I took all of my problem children and put them all in one pot. So what we end up having in this pot is excess dye floating around in some rather warm water. So I'm going to get rid of the fabric so that you can see how much color has come off of these fabrics and is floating around in the water. So the problem arises when you have a quilt that has both these fabrics and white fabrics, particularly side by side. And when you put them into the wash, just like when you come out of the wash and you've turned your husband's underwear pink because you put it in with a red sock, the same problem applies to your quilts. But of course, it's so much worse when you've put hours and hours and hours of work into a quilt. You never want to see that color running or dyeing the other colors in your quilt. So it's most obvious with whites, but of course, if you had a light yellow, it's going to turn it more of an orangey color if it's in with these reds. If you have white in the print, so maybe it's a red and white print, and then that print ends up being red and pink. So you know the problem. We're going to look for what kind of products give us the best resolution to this problem. So I'm getting rid of as much of the dye-soaked water as possible. Let me just pull it over here into my colander. Okay, and I'll set this aside. Actually, let me go ahead and get the rest of that water out here. I want to make sure I have enough to fill up my 5 comparison jars. Okay, so I have a couple of fabrics that I know are going to be problem colors, or I suspect are going to be problem colors. We're going to play around with a few other things that we can do with those fabrics as well. I'm looking for my spray bottle. That's okay. Okay. So now I have this pot of some deep pink water. And I say pink because it's more of that fuchsia color. It's not really red. It's more of that fuchsia. That fuchsia color is a known problem. It's a fiber reactive dye, and it has not only problem of bleeding, but it has another problem that we call cold wet bleeding. So it's not about having that fabric in your wash water. It's about when you leave the quilt in the washer. So it might be cold and it might just be sitting there. But if you leave that overnight, it's the cold, wet bleeding that is the problem. It's not just washing. Sometimes if you wash and dry right away, you don't see the problem. It's only when you let that fabric sit there that the bleeding happens. So let's just fill up these jars. Looks like Kool-Aid, doesn't it? Well, we're not going to drink that. We are going to make sure that everybody knows that this is dye water. And I think I've got just enough to fill up all 5 of my canning jars here. I really want you to see that color. And if they look different on the screen, it's only because of what's under it. These, you could see, these all came from the same container. So we know that the dye concentration is the same in all of these colors, all of these jars. So where am I going to go with this? Well, I cut up some fabrics to go into that dye bath. And let's see, where did they go? You know, I prepare this stuff ahead of time and then I lose everything. So let me go ahead and cut those again. I wonder if I brought them upstairs with me, but I'll just go ahead and cut up these fabrics again. So what I've done is I have taken my fabrics and I want to make the same size fabric for each one of these dye baths. And so I'm just going to cut a piece that's roughly 3 inches wide. Doesn't matter what the width is. I just want to put a piece of fabric in there that's roughly the same size for every single dye bath. So I'm going to go ahead and do about 8 inches across and 3 inches wide. And if I make 5 of those, we will be able to test out the 4 different products that I have here on my table, as well as we'll keep one as our control. So whenever you're doing an experiment, you want to have one as a control. Oh, I found my fabrics are underneath here. So these are the ones that I had cut up already. So not only did I cut up my my white fabric, but I cut up some white on white as well. White on whites tend to be a problem because not only will the white fabric pick up the color, but the white print will pick up the color as well. So I've got 4 of those, and I'm going to just put a little piece of each one of those in my control. So I've got a piece of the white and I've got a piece of the white on white. Now, it doesn't really matter when I put these in. It's all a matter of how much fabric, how much color do those fabrics absorb when you put them in with that leftover dye that's in there. So let me get one of each. And then we're going to line up. Let me get a little rag here to clean up my spill. Okay, we're going to line up our color catchers to see which one is which. So we've got the Shout color catcher, we've got the Carbona color grabber, we've got Dr. Beckmann's color and dirt collector, and we've got XCLEEN color and dye eraser. So we're going to put them in these containers in that order. And then we're going to have a control here that doesn't have any color collector in it at all. All right, so here we go. Let's get the color catcher in there first. And let's see, this is 24 color catchers. And of course, you can get them in different quantities. So the pricing is going to vary depending on how many you buy. But I wanted to just go ahead and get a comparison. And it's really nice on Amazon, because on Amazon, it tells you per sheet what that costs. So their prices are per sheet. Now, I also want to say that all of these color grabbing products are only made to be used once. I also have in my cart for a future experiment some color grabbers that are meant to be used more than once. So I thought we would do the one-time use sheets first. And then on another session, we'll do some more of the one-time use sheets. And we will use some of the reusable sheets also. That way we can really get a good comparison of what it costs to clean up one load of clothing or one load of fabric for making your quilts. Okay, so we have our sheets ready to go in this order. We have our fabrics ready to go. So I've got 2 fabrics and the sheet. I'm just going to put them right into that dye-colored water. Let's see, 2 fabrics and my sheet. I'm just going to fold them up like this and put them into my dye-colored water. Here's another one with the sheet. Fold it up, put it in that dye-colored water. We've got one more with our sheet. Put it into that dye-colored water. And I'll need one more of the plain old fabric, 3 inches, roughly 8 inches. And we've got our little pieces of the white on white print as well. That's going to go in my control. So that one has nothing in it. It doesn't have any color catcher in there. So this, obviously, this one should be the worst case scenario as far as dye transferring to that fabric. So let me clean up my mess and let's give this a little bit of time. Now, while we're waiting for that, I'm going to heat up my iron. So let's say, Alexa, turn on iron.
Okay.
I hope all of your irons didn't just go on when I asked Alexa to put my iron on. But I want to do another little experiment here. So I have some white fabric. And while those pieces are sitting in the dye-colored water, remember the water's the same, so I'm not going to bother washing my little stick here. I'm just going to stir those around a little bit. And you might see a couple things happen. We're going to see some dye attract itself to the color catcher. We may see some dye that stains the white fabric. And we might see the dye stain the white on white fabric. I really don't know what's going to happen. I want to see what happens when we do this experiment with all the different products. So you get to do that with me. And we're just going to sit here and wait for a few minutes while this does its job. Now, normally you would put these right in the washing machine. And some people put in 2 or 3 of them just to be safe. I'm just doing 1 because we have such a small quantity of water here. So let's just leave that alone for a bit and see what happens. Okay, I'm going to grab my fabric here, my white fabric, and I'm going to just cut a little bit of that white fabric, maybe about a 3-inch square. I'm going to cut several of them because I want to do another test for you that we do in the textile industry, and it's called hot wet press. When we do hot wet press, we need to get our fabrics wet. So I need my spray bottles here. And not only I'm going to spray these fabrics, I'm going to get them soaking wet. So I'm going to spray, and then I'm going to flip them around so I know that I've saturated these pieces of fabric all the way through. So yeah, let's make sure they're all getting an even amount of water. They are dripping wet at this point. Absolutely dripping wet. Okay. Now, I'm going to do this experiment on my June Taylor mat. This might stain the mat. So if you want to play with this at home, go ahead and use some white fabric or a terry cloth towel or something to protect your mat. I have some old junky fabric over here. It is just like, it's so thin. I'm not going to use it for anything. So I'm going to fold that up a little bit just to protect my mat. And what we're going to do is a hot wet press test. So we're going to take 2 of those wet squares of fabric, and we're going to take our suspect fabrics. So our suspect fabrics are things that I think are going to cause me a problem, both in the cold water bleeding or in the wash water or in a hot wet press situation. So why do I test for hot wet press? Even if a fabric doesn't bleed in the washing machine, or if I know a fabric bleeds in the washing machine, I can also suspect that it's going to be a culprit for hot wet press. So where this would be important is if you are pressing seams open or pressing seams to one side, and you're either using a lot of steam or you use a spray bottle on your fabrics, you're going to be pressing this fabric while it's wet. So the fabric's going to be hot and it's going to be wet, and you're going to press it. So this hot wet press test just means that we are pressing that fabric until it's dry. I'm going to leave the iron mark just where it is. I'm not going to move that iron because I want to see just where it's hot and just where it's wet, what happens to that fabric color. And oh my goodness, this one is a bad one. And I just pulled this out of my stash up in my garage. Because it's in my garage, those fabrics may not be washed. Anything that makes it down here into my sewing room, I know is washed. Look at that hot wet press problem. That dye has transferred wherever I pressed it while it was wet and it was in contact with the white fabric. So this is what hot wet press looks like when your fabrics are going to be a problem. So let's put that one aside. That was a batik fabric. Now, somebody said to me yesterday, I thought batiks didn't run. Well, absolutely, that is not the case. Batiks can really run because they are dyed. They're not printed necessarily. They can be printed with wax, and then the dye gets resisted by the wax. But they are primarily colored with dye. I lost my little white. Oh, here they are. They're under the iron. So they are printed with dyes. So if a dye is going to run, it's going to run in a batik just like it is with your other fabrics. In fact, when they're making the batiks, I'm not sure how much of a process they go through after they are dyed, how much washing gets done. So it's really in the washing process after the dyeing. If they can use enough water, they can get rid of all of the excess dye. However, there are certain colors that are known to be a problem where you can't get out all of the excess. And that fuchsia is one of those problem colors. So I took several fabrics that I thought would be a problem. You know what? I really should take a fabric that I don't think is going to be a problem and do this hot wet test. So here, this fabric right here does not have a hot wet press problem. This one came out clean as can be. And I'm proud of that one. That's an old VIP fabrics from Princeton Printworks where I used to work. No hot wet press issue. How did I suspect that? Yes and no. Even at the best companies like Princeton Print where I used to work, even at the best companies, certain dyes have that problem. So it really depends on how that fabric was made. What dye colors was it made from? So, however, in a good quality print house, like we used to have here in the US, we would do all of these tests every day on every piece of fabric before it went out of the shop. So you knew if you were buying your fabrics, and no matter where you bought them, they would have gone through this testing. Now, that's not necessarily the case anymore because all of our fabric is being produced overseas. So it's the people ordering the fabric that would have to do the testing. And I'm just not sure they have the manpower to do that anymore. I used to work in the lab, so this was something we did on a regular basis, or we had a quality control lab where that was the person's job, was just to do this type of test. So before we let any fabric go out the door, I would bring samples down to the lab, or the people on the show floor would, on the manufacturing floor would, and all of these tests would be done before the fabric shipped out to any customers. So here's another one. Beautiful hot wet press, not a problem. So far, the only one I've had a problem with was that really, really dark batik. I'm going to do, let's see, I've got a whole pile of reds right here. And what about this blue? What about this navy blue? Let's give that one a test. I don't only like to do reds. I like to see what other colors are going to have a problem with dye or with hot wet press. So let's try this beautiful batik fabric. Now I know that these deep colors, and you'll notice that there's that fuchsia undertone in this color. I know that these can be a problem because of the way that they're manufactured. They're manufactured in Bali or Indonesia, and they don't necessarily have the ability to do all of the washing that needs to happen after the color is dyed. So they can be an issue. But you might not have an issue with hot wet press. You might only have an issue when it sits in the water. So it's two different problems. So that's what I'm trying to get across here, is that some fabrics will have one problem, some fabrics will have the other problem, and some fabrics will have both. Now, there are other color tests that you can do, but this one is showing a definite problem with hot wet press. So what this does for me, this reinforces the fact that I wash all my fabrics before I use them. I do not let any fabric come into my sewing room that hasn't been washed, and this is why. Now, I know it's not really fun to wash fabrics. However, if you can just run your fabrics through a regular wash with one of these ColorCatcher products, wouldn't that be the best case scenario? Not having to wash by hand and not having to worry about the color bleeding. So let's finish up our test, and we're going to see which one is working best. Now, I already can see that some are working better than others. You can see the color of that water getting lighter with some of the more expensive products. But I suspect that we're going to, well, this is my hypothesis, that every one of them is going to work, but it's going to work to a different degree. So if one works twice as well as the other, we might want to put twice as many color catchers in if we're going to use the cheaper alternative. But I want to compare 1 to 1 to 1 without putting a different number of color catchers in. I want to see which one works best. Then we'll be able to have a game plan of what we're going to do with our own fabric so that we feel confident and comfortable using these fabrics. So here are 2 more fabrics. So we had 2 with no hot wet press issues, and we have 3 fabrics where you can see the indentation of that iron. This iron is rather nice. It's got that big foot on the bottom that comes down and lifts the iron up off of the surface so it doesn't burn your surface. And that big hole right there is a great indication. All around it has the dye, and where it didn't get heated up, it doesn't have any dye at all. So do not think I'm picking on one particular batik company. All of our batik fabrics are dyed colors. They're not done with pigments, which is more like a paint that goes on the surface. These are dyed colors. So I'm not picking on any particular company. They will all be a problem. So what I'm trying to do is just make you aware of what those problems are, how we can solve that problem, and don't think you're safe just because some fabrics from one company do not run. Others will. It's the nature of the dye and not the company that made them. Okay? And the same companies, all different companies use the same dyes. So certain colors will be a problem pretty much no matter where you get them from. However, if the company takes extra precautions with extra rinses and extra chemicals in there, you can minimize the problem. So you might find that some companies are better than others because of the way the fabrics were processed. So let's go ahead and take these out of the dye bath. We have our Shout ColorCatcher, and I'm going to just lay this out so that we can compare the colors. I've got my white fabric and I've got my white on white fabric. So let's compare all of these. I'm going to fold them in half so we can put them all on the same sheet here. Okay, number 2, that is the Carbona. It's funny because my friend Kathy said to me yesterday, she's one of our members in Ahead of the Curve, and she said, have you used the Carbona before? And I said, no, it was expensive, so I didn't buy that one, but I did. I actually wanted to get the widest range of prices that we could, along with the widest range of effectiveness. So I thought maybe the more expensive ones would be more effective. And so I did spring for the more expensive product. And I will test all of these products in time. When I went on Amazon, there were probably 12 different versions of this product. This one's interesting because it's printed with Dr. Beckmann's right on the sheet, so you know it's the sheet and not anything else in your wash. It's easy to identify. There is our white fabric, and here is our white on white. Now I'm going to bring these up closely so you can inspect them yourself. And I'm going to go ahead and throw another sheet in these dye baths because I want to see if it will continue to take the color out if you add more of these sheets. So there's our white fabric. Here is our white on white. Boy, that one's pretty clean. And here is our ColorCatcher. Wow. All right. So let's do this. We're going to take out our control. Now, Those were very minor differences in time. I probably should have had some help here and taken them all out at the same time, but I don't have any help here in my sewing room today. So here we go. This is our control, which should be the worst one for color on the white. And it should be the worst one for the color on the white on white. And I do believe that's exactly what I'm seeing. So let's put these all down. Okay. I'm going to throw one more ColorCatcher in there to see if it will continue to do its job. In fact, let's do two. Let's do two. I want to see how much of this dye these ColorCatchers will pick up if I overload them in my washing machine with more ColorCatchers than is called for. Each one of these sheets says to put 1 or 2 in the wash. I'm going to put 2 in each one. Now, I hope this is interesting for you. I know the process can be a little bit boring, but I hope the information is going to help you be happier with your choices. You're going to know which product is going to work best for you. You're going to know if it's worth the money to buy a more expensive product. And you're going to know that it's money well spent. No matter which product you opt for, you know that it is doing the job that it was intended to do. So let's see. Here is our comparison. This one is the Shout ColorCatcher. This one is the Carbona. Here is Dr. Beckmann's, and here is the XCLEEN Color and Dye Absorber. When these are dry, I'm going to write all those product names on there so we can document this, and we'll write a blog post about it. So look at the white fabric and how it picked up the dye. Each one of them picked up the dye, but here's our control. Our control is much darker than the one with XCLEEN. It's darker than Dr. Beckmann's. It's darker than the Color Grabber, and it's a little bit darker than the Shout. Isn't that interesting? The Shout has always been my standard go-to, and it's not doing as good of a job as the other 3 products. So let's make a judgment here. Absolutely, hands down, the XCLEEN has the least amount of color that's transferred to the plain white fabric. But I will note, every single one of them has dye transferred to the white fabric. There is not one that kept that white fabric perfectly clean. So I'm curious to know how many of these in this small little container, how many of these sheets I need to take all that dye out. And I did really overload my pot, right? There's probably about 2 yards of fabric in there. And I put it in a pot so it's a small container of water. If you put in 2 yards of fabric in your washing machine, you're using a lot more water and you're not going to see as high of a concentration of dye. So I really did concentrate this as much as I can. I went out looking this morning for dye powder to put in my water, and I couldn't find any dye powder. I had given it all away. So this was my next best solution, was to use actual fabric, which is better for us anyway, because that's what we do. We use actual fabric. Now let's look at those white on white prints. I'm not sure how well you can see those. Let me come up a little bit closer and we can get some light on the subject, because I've got several different lights over here that I can turn on. Here we go. This one. And let's get some real good light on that subject and see which one of these has the most amount of color that is attracted to the white on white fabric. Obviously, our control is the worst one. And it's a little hard to see in the picture. Maybe that light is too much. Let me turn off that light. Let the camera adjust. And you can see the same thing is true with the white on white fabric. It has picked up the color as well and about the same proportion as the white fabric. So that white print is not making it worse. I suspected it would because there are binders in the print. That's like a glue in the print. And I thought that would attract the color even more. But it seems to be just the background fabric that's attracting the color. And it doesn't really make that big of a difference having the white on white print or just the white fabric by itself. So look at those differences. Those are pretty darn good differences. So what we find out from that is that the ColorCatcher absolutely does a little bit of that job. It gets some of the dye out of the fabric. But unless you're using more than one ColorCatcher, it's not taking enough of the dye out so that it doesn't stain that white fabric. And this is concentrated. I did heat it up on the stove, so it's a lot more dye in the solution, but I think that's a great indication of what products are going to work best for us. I think for hands down, I would vote for the Color and Dye Absorber by XCLEEN. Okay, so what happens when you do this and you get your fabric that's all pink? What happens when this dries and your fabric ends up pink? Well, you can watch one of my other YouTube videos on using Dawn dishwashing detergent in order to take color out of fabric that has run. So whether it's the fabric itself or a color next to that fabric, even a quilt that's all made, you can use hot water and Dawn dishwashing detergent to remove the color that has run. So let me go back and let's see some of your questions. And if you have questions about the samples, we'll get those samples back again. But let me sit down so I can read all of your questions and comments so far on this episode of Sewing and Slippers with Sue. Okay. So, good morning, everybody. Says Kathy in Ohio is here. Hi, Mary Poppin. Hi, Elaine. Wonderful to see you. Is that a hero marker as a die stir stick? It absolutely was, Elaine. It was my big fat hero marker that I don't use very often. You've heard that your local water can also impact bleeding. Can I confirm that? I would suspect that you are correct because there are lots of different chemicals that can be found in your water, hard water in particular, with the calcium in there and other minerals in there probably will affect bleeding. Whether it takes more color out of the fabric itself or the chemicals that are in the water bond with that dye or help to set the dye on your fabric, there are different ways that those chemicals can interact. So anytime you have anything in your water, it can definitely affect how your dyes react. Vicki, hot water press is new to my brain. I haven't really thought about that as a color safety test. Okay, Vicki, good. Yeah, it's definitely one that we use in the textile industry for every single lot of fabric that goes through. Interesting that the Carbona has a $1 coupon inside the box. Oh, isn't that interesting? I hadn't noticed that. Oh, look at that. Yep, a $1 coupon for the next time you buy the Carbona sheets. And that is the one that took out the most color. White on white looks white still on the camera, but the whites are strongly pink. Yes, absolutely. It's that pinking up of the white that we're measuring. And if we had there's a tool called the spectrophotometer where you can actually put the fabric into the tool and it will measure the color. It will give you a color number. You could actually measure how much color is in each one of those. I don't happen to have a spectrophotometer here at my sewing room, but that would be a good comparison because then it's a actual number. It's not just a more or less number. It's actually a quantitative value. Good morning from Chattanooga. Welcome, Jody. So good. Dawn dishwashing detergent for washing by hand or machine. By hand. I don't put Dawn dishwashing detergent in my machine because it causes too much suds. So you don't want to have an overflow in your washing machine. You don't want to use a hand or a hand washing dish soap in your washing machine, just like you wouldn't use a hand washing dish soap in your dishwasher. So I only use the Dawn dishwashing detergent, just the blue one, the regular one. And I use it either in the bathtub or in my white porcelain sink with hot boiling water, and that will take out the bleeding. I have a whole other episode on using Dawn to take out bleeding. So I tell you what, we'll probably do that again at the end of these sessions where I test out some more products. I can then take maybe half of the white fabric that has the bleeding on it, and we can do that Dawn dishwashing test and see if we can get those whites white again by using the Dawn and boiling hot water. I'm going to be in Texas next week for Tuesday, so I may just do that test in Texas, but I think I'd rather get more products tested first. So I don't know what I'm going to do in Texas. We'll be inspired by Texas, and we'll do something that relates down there for rotary cut applique. In the meantime, I'll be purchasing some more of these products so that we can see for the price which one works best. Now, I'm not going to go on Amazon right now and get the prices for you. I will do that at a later time, and I'll put it down in the comments so that you know, or I can actually update the description so you'll know at what price point you're getting your best value. We could cut cacti in Texas. Oh, wouldn't that be fun? I love that idea, Vicki. Absolutely. I'm going to write that down because it is a good topic. And I love cacti, and I think that would be a great topic. I was thinking of doing vacation quilts. And I can incorporate the cacti into vacation quilts because I visited the most beautiful botanical garden. While I was in the south of France, I went to visit the city of Aix, or the town of Aix. It's a small town. It's a small medieval town built on the top of a hill with a castle on the top. Now, the castle is in ruins. However, some brilliant person decided to make that castle and all the paths on the hillside into an exotic garden. So that exotic garden had lots of succulents because it's a very dry climate there. So there were a lot of succulents, there were a lot of cacti, and it was one of the most beautiful places in southern France that I have ever visited. So with vacation quilts in mind, maybe I will do a little scene. I'll look through my photos and we can do a little scene with some cacti. Now, many of you know that my mom broke her neck last, while I was in France. So it was probably 4 weeks ago now. Interesting. When you break your neck, of course, it's not necessarily every bone in your neck. It's not, straight across. There are many, many bones in your neck. And she broke 3 bones in her neck. And so she doesn't have any paralysis or anything like that. None of what you think about when you hear somebody broke their neck. But she's in a big fat collar that goes all the way up to her cheekbones. She's very uncomfortable. She's very sore, and doing everyday things like washing your clothes and washing fabrics for quilting, and quilting itself is just not possible for her right now. So I'm going to go spend some time with her next week. I'll be leaving on Monday and staying till the following Monday. That means Sewing and Slippers with Sue on Tuesday is going to be broadcast from my mom's sewing room in Texas. Okay, Kat says, that's Kathy. Actually, I use a tiny amount of Dawn on grease stains in my washing machine. Yeah, absolutely. If you're using a tiny little bit of Dawn, that's not going to make your washing machine bubble over. So yes, you can use it for spot cleaning for sure, but I wouldn't do it in a whole quilt where I really need to soak the quilt in hot water and Dawn. That doesn't do a great job in the washing machine. So I would do that in my bathtub. Hot water, with Dawn, keep the quilt submerged, and you're going to get out all of those stains. Okay, fabulous. Now, we were going to do that blue fabric, and I didn't do the blue. It is a solid blue, and I don't know if it would be a problem. But last week, I washed 4 yards of black fabric. I don't need to go get it. It's right there, but you know what black fabric looks like. It's a beautiful black fabric from Island Boutique. I put in only 1 Shout ColorCatcher, just 1, and that's the amount of dye that came off for an entire 4.5 yards of fabric. This is not going to be a problem. That is not the amount of dye that's going to cause me a problem down the road. But you can see my other samples, that red, right? That red is extremely deep. It's got a lot of color on there. It's the reds, the navy blues, turquoise greens, things like that that I really worry about. I would worry about a black. If this came out totally black in the wash, I would have put it through a second time and even a third time. But this right here, I wasn't concerned about that amount of black coming off my black, really, really black fabric in the wash. So let's take another peek at these dye baths. We've got the Shout ColorCatcher. Now, remember, there was lots of different types of dyes in this bath because I had lots of different fabrics in there. When I take out the ColorCatcher, it still has a lot of color in there, but it's a very blue color. I don't know if you can see that. Let me see if I can put the light behind it. I'm just going to grab that, my little ring light. Oh, it's all tied up here, but I'm going to grab that ring light so that I can put the light behind the dye, and you're going to be able to see. Oh, you can't. It even washes it right out. Okay, I'm going to put it off to the side here. You can see how pink that water is and how it's got a lot of blue tinge to it. It's not like a burgundy. It's more of a purpley color. That light is just too bright. I think you can see it better without the light behind it. So let's just put it in front of that white quilt. Yeah. So the color has changed, right? It took all of the yellow dye out of there, or all of the orangey dye out of there, but it left some of that really purpley dye behind. This is really interesting because the color grabber from Carbona took out all of that blue color, and you can see that has a yellow cast, doesn't it? It's almost orangey. So it's taking out different dyes depending on which color catcher I'm using. So this one has taken out most of the color, but it's left behind a little bit of the yellow color. So that that sample looks very orangey compared to the other one. Let's see. This one is halfway in between. Okay, it's a little bit, it's not as blue as the first one, and it's not as orangey as the second one. And the last one, this is the XCLEEN. My goodness, there's hardly any dye left in that sample. So I really do believe the XCLEEN is my number one so far. Now, as I said, there were probably, I don't know, 11 or 12 different products out there. So when I go to complete this experiment, I want to make sure that we do all of the different kinds. So I'll probably have another session like this where we do it again. It's probably going to be done with different colors, so I'm not going to really be able to compare these samples to those samples, but we'll always put a control in there. We'll always put the Shout ColorCatcher so that we can compare it against the others, and we'll always do a control with no color catcher at all so we can see the difference between those two. All right, well, this was a fun way to see what color catchers can do for us. My eyes are opened. I really did not suspect that the XCLEEN color and dye absorber was going to be the best one out there. I'll go in and I'll look at all the prices. I'll break it down per sheet, and I'll give you the prices in the comments. So I hope you have had fun today experimenting, doing some color chemistry on Sewing in Slippers with Sue. You want to protect your fabric so the dyes don't run, and a small investment in a color catcher for your washer is going to be a great investment to keep your quilts safe and clean. Thank you for joining me today. I'll see you next week from Texas. It's Sue Pelland saying goodbye from Sewing in Slippers with Sue. Now we're cutting to the commercial break. Tonight we have Applique School. Applique School is happening on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday this week. Today we're going to be rotary cutting our applique shapes with fusible on them. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about rotary cutting our hand applique shapes. So I'll be doing a demonstration of hand applique. Then on Thursday, we're going to do glue applique. For large shapes and for certain instances in our quilts, we may want to use glue for our applique bond instead of using a fusible. So I'll give you all of the circumstances where you might want to use glue instead of a fusible. We'll go through fusible applique today, hand applique tomorrow, and glue applique on Thursday. Go to my website, SuePellandDesigns.com, to register for Applique School. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day. Bye.